Welcome to the Let's Go Recovery podcast, where we investigate sobriety and beyond that, explore solutions to help us heal at the core, where the root of our problems like addiction or alcoholism begin. We hope you hear something in today's podcast that ignites a change in your life. I'm here today with Matt Shively, pastor, counselor, and professor, and also has a master's in psychology or counseling. So we're going to jump right into it with Matt. And I'm going to get right to the root of it. Matt, you're a pastor here at the Grove in Chandler, Arizona, and I know you talk to a lot of people and do a lot of stuff in the addiction area. The effect, what's going on in that, and what are you seeing in the family dynamic with drugs and addiction?
Yeah. I mean, as you know, addiction doesn't just affect one person. It affects the whole family, the loved ones, and it really is, there is a fallout to it that is I mean, it's a whole group of people that need to be cared for in the middle of it and on the other side of it, you know? And so I think that's my passion, is walking with people in that space. The spouse is affected by it, the kids affected by it oftentimes, and helping them, first of all, process it. You know, what did I do to deserve this? I think is a common feeling for both a spouse and a child of addiction. And so, yeah, just learning how to put it away, you know, be able to place it and put it in a proper space that they can start to heal.
I think that's great that you said, like, that what did I do to deserve this, right? That's such an easy place for people to get into.
Right.
And I know I speak from my own journey, like my wife probably feels that way. I didn't want this. I didn't want to be dealt this set of cards. What is the counseling aspect of that? Where do you step off with somebody that comes in and says, we've struggled with addiction or alcoholism or any of the other types of stuff that, you know, might come up in counseling? What's the jumping off point where I'm going to say the healing journey begins?
Yeah, I mean, as you know, with the steps, it comes to that place where, you know, the addict has to realize that they're powerless to control that. They have to come out of that denial space and realize that, you know what, I can't control. These are just to do the things I know I shouldn't do. So the effect on the family is very similar, right? I'm powerless to control my husband to do the things, or my dad or my mom to do these things. And so it starts with surrender, I think, you know, of realizing this is big. This is bigger than me. This is overwhelming. I oftentimes use the analogy of like a mountain. And if you look up at the top of the peak, you're like, I can't do this. You know, I can't. It's too big. You have to look just like 1 foot up. That's it. Next handhold. That's it, you know. So go slow. So in a sense, you have to back up to that. And I think the other piece to that is you can't do it alone. You were meant to. And I mean, that's how you got there. That's not how you're going to get out of there. For all of the involved parties. I mean, it's very similar. Support and connection is a must from the get-go.
Yeah, you talk about it. Obviously, that's our tagline. The opposite of addiction is connection. And I think so many times, especially in a place like a church. So you're a pastor at a pretty big church here, and it seems like that in a church, it's super easy to slip into the idea that I'm alone. And we were talking a little bit before we got started about this difference between loneliness and being alone. If I look around the congregation of the church I attend, I think people are shocked by the number of families and individuals that are being affected by things like addiction, struggle, because I come to church on a Sunday morning. You're getting my polished, very best version of Tracy and his family, and I did it for 20 years.
Right.
Talk to me about that, where people come into your office and think, I'm so alone. I'm the only one. I can't believe I have to deal with. Talk to me a little bit about that and that separation from self.
Right. Oh, absolutely. I think, you know, not to blame it on COVID, but it really did shine the light on isolation being such an internal thing, not just a physical thing. You know, I think physically we were told to distance ourselves from humans, but that had an impact emotionally and socially as well. And so I think oftentimes that's what happens in addiction, is that isolation begins. Even if you're isolating, but I go drinking with buddies. Like, but you're very limiting your space. And now you're limited to just a certain few people that are also isolated. And so I think you're right. You could be incredibly lonely around people. You could be incredibly lonely in a mass of people. Like, you're right. I mean, we have a special kind of dynamic at our church where the room is something where when you look out, you don't see backs of heads, you see faces. And it's unique. It's just set in the round, kind of think of like a boxing ring, that kind of thing. And so you could see on all four sides, you could see faces, people, expressions. And so a lot of times I'll sit in there and I'll just kind of pray and like, where are the lonely people at? And I'll just look for faces that tell me a story they need it. They need connection. They need more. And so oftentimes when I sit down and talk to people, like I see that same look on their face, a couple, maybe just, it should have been a couple, but it's just one of them. That's like, hey, I came in for marriage counseling. Where's your spouse? Like, that's not how that works, but it's a start. It's good. You need to talk. You need to start processing. So yeah, I think it is definitely something that loneliness is more than just physical proximity to people. It's a connection, disconnection, I guess, that is evident on the faces of those that either are in addiction or a byproduct of addiction.
Yeah, I like to say that we're separated in addiction. We're separated from our families, our finances, our friends, but ultimately we're separated from ourselves. Mm-hmm. And when we start thinking about isolation and loneliness, one, it's the cause of most addiction, or at least it doesn't help any of the addictions, right? Any of the things. But as we start saying things like, I'm not alone, and, oh, you deal with that too, I think we start to see that the power gets stripped away from that, whatever the behavior is, right? So if I find another person that's maybe on a journey of, let's say health, for example, it's way easier for me to go to the gym if I get a couple of buddies to meet me at the gym. Right. So talk to me about that, about putting people, and I guess it's kind of got to be a safe spot, but the encouragement is find somebody like you. And if that's a woman that either struggled in a certain area, or it's a man that's dealing with a certain thing at work, find somebody that's been on that journey, somebody that can go through that. Obviously, that gets into the step work, right? Yeah, we find a sponsor, we find somebody to go through that with you. But what are you telling like a kid or a family that's from the first time saying, hey, we want to address something that's going on in our household, but we don't know where to begin with somebody else? What are you saying to them?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. And I think solidarity is the most powerful thing you can have with a person, to realize you're not alone, that someone else has walked down that road before you, even just a step or two ahead, is so powerful. And so every time, it's great doing counseling in a setting where we're a church and we have these different ministries going on all week long. I tell them, you got to get plugged in. You got to get plugged in the ministry. You got to find people like you, maybe not that much like you, but at least a little bit. Sure. So you realize you're not alone, and you got to find a handhold, because we're sliding down this mountain. And we need to grab hold of something so we know that there's other people that understand like us. And so, first of all, so many people go through similar problems. That's the fact, right? You aren't really that special, but you are. But, and so trying to let them know, hey, you're not unique in the sense that other people have been there and are there. I found that incredibly peaceful to know that I'm not alone in my struggle. And so, yeah, trying to teach these kids, trying to get them connected with other kids. Sometimes, you know their story and other people's story in the church, and I need to hook them up. Yeah, exactly. So sometimes it's a direct connection, like, you know what, you guys need to go have coffee, or you need to go hang out with them and have a conversation,
I had a mom tell me recently that I never told anyone X, and I was like, you've carried that around, right? Like, you've lived with that yourself. And she said she was a lot like a drug addict in that she was addicted to hiding from her pain. Like, we talk about pain being the root or one of the causes of addiction. I want to say causes, but kind of back at the core, right, is a trauma, is some sort of incident that happened maybe even as a youth.
Right.
And now I've found that as a coping mechanism. So when you're talking to families in the setting of, I'm going to say, counseling, how do you get to the core of where this began, whether it be for the individual, the addict themselves, or the family, when they start recognizing, where did this start? How do you get to that spot? How do you find that peaceful spot?
Yeah, so there's always kind of a precipitating event, right, that got him there, got him to the point of reaching out. And we see this in the addiction space too. It's like, I can't do this alone anymore. I'm broken, and so something caused them to get that last step of broken to cause them to reach out. So that's where you start. Like, what brought you in? Like, what caused you to reach out? And then you start dialing it back. And usually people have a story to tell. It kind of, you give them the space to talk, it starts to tumble out, and you just direct it. You just kind of go back. There's some techniques in counseling that shy away from going back in the past too much. And I get it, right?
Sure.
If you live in the past, you're kind of stuck, the Uncle Rico thing. Like, you never move forward in life, right? And so I get it. And so there's focuses on the here and now. And I think both of those things can work together really well. Take the here and now. What brought you in? What are you feeling now? But where did that come from? Is that new? Is that a new feeling for you? Is that something that came from an event in your past? And sometimes they know exactly where it came from. They're just like not ready to tell you yet. And so it's getting them comfortable to go there. Sometimes they have no clue. They've repressed it. It's so deeply embedded, they don't even know themselves. And so by talking, it starts to loosen the dirt around that thing that was hard packed for years for them.
Yeah, and I think there's probably been some discovery that when I say that, my wife is reacting out of things that happened to her over years, right? So her experience is X, right? In any relationship, my experience is X. I may not even know that, right? Like, I don't have a problem with, addiction or whatever in my family, so I don't even know what that looks like. And all of a sudden we come into a counseling session, she says X, Y, Z, and I go, what? Where did that come from? And it's because I learned this behavior, or this is the way we always attacked it in our family. And so as you come in from, I'm going to say 2 or 3 different forms of experiences, how do you kind of bring that connection together to where, hey, listen, one, you said you're not unique, you're not alone, but also is that our healing journey has to begin together as a family. I'm looking at the family dynamic. The family dynamic says we need to heal together. But I also have to consider that you have 30 years or 40 years of experiences that are jaded, or again, your experience that may or may not be your spouse's. How are you bringing that family together and telling them, one, that this is a process that we all have to kind of be on the same mission or the same journey? What does some of that look like for you guys in counseling?
Yeah, I mean, that's good. I mean, it's good to know that, trauma, that word trauma is huge. I'm sure you use it all the time,
Absolutely.
Right? But it's like, it can be compounded, with other traumas. Traumas aren't clean. You don't experience them one at a time necessarily. In fact, that one trauma hurt because it was like piggybacking off of another trauma. You know what I mean? So they have an interplay that is hard to understand. So I think there is a level where having that understanding, like, I think that's amazing. If you're coming into kind of a family session, you're on the other side of addiction, or at least in the process of recovery, and you realize as the recovering addict, you've done some serious damage here, but you've also done some serious damage on top of where other damage was already done. Just having that awareness of it's easy, at first to be humble and to eat crow, but when do you get full of crow?
I'm full up on this. No more crow.
I'm done. And so that's the danger zone in my experience. Is okay. He's done. He's done paying for this, but that's not how that works. Like, you can't be done. And so staying humble is like the secret sauce of recovery for all the above. And the kids need a space to whatever age they are. Right. The littles. Hopefully a lot of that will go over their head, but you still need to give them the space to process it, what it's done for them. But I think, back to something you mentioned earlier, I think self-awareness is the thing I preach for each individual in that session. Like, that's the greatest gift you can give, not only yourself, but your loved ones, your wife, your kids, that you're aware, guys, I know I'm doing this to you, and I hate that, and I don't want to, and I'm working on that, And I've had those experiences in my own family where I need to just kind of say, guys, I messed up. Like, I did. And that's not just a one-time declaration. It's an ongoing thing, because you're going to mess up again. Yeah. Even in recovery, you're not a saint.
Right.
You're still working.
Yeah. I think that people oftentimes think that, and especially when it's a substance, right? Like, I haven't used that substance in a while.
Right.
I can still be angry.
Right.
I can still expect too much, right? Or setting expectations at all, I've learned, is a really unsafe spot for myself and my kids. Like, I've got to be in a position to, one, allow them the grace to fail and succeed, but also understand that some of what I did 10 years ago isn't always just gone because I've stopped doing X drug, X drink, X behavior. I don't just eliminate all of their experience. So my self-awareness is, oh, when I do this, you feel this. I still have to be willing to, I'm not going to say pay for it. I'm eat crow. I kind of get where you go too much of that.
Yeah.
But there is going to be reactions that I haven't figured out, and they certainly haven't figured out in a new space. I'm on a healing journey. I'm on a recovery journey. How do I react for the fact that dad doesn't want to hear that anymore, but I need to also talk about this? What does that look like in the communication process of, I like to use the word safe a lot because it's super hard for me to take it on the chin all the time, but I also know that I need to hear fully what my wife is thinking about, what my wife cares for me to say. What is that sort of safe spot that you're trying to put families at that are on that journey that isn't quite, haven't arrived yet? What's that look like?
Before we were getting ready, you mentioned kind of the power of creativity, right? And how creativity can really put you in a space to heal, right? And so in those kind of settings too, I encourage them to think outside the box. And so it's like, well, you're used to communication being just a conversation, Have you considered writing down your feelings? Have you considered journaling them? My wife and I did something early in our marriage, and we haven't done it in a long time, and it wasn't related to trauma, but we each picked out a journal for the other person, and we wrote in their journal. And it was our way of writing some really heartfelt things that we maybe didn't always have the courage to say out loud, but we would write it, and then we would exchange journals occasionally to read it. And so something like that would be really cool, just to have them, if she's like, I know I keep telling you how you have hurt me with this addiction, and I know you're tired of hearing it, but maybe if I write down some thoughts and kind of piece it together in a different way, if you're super artistic and you can like paint something that represent, like, don't limit it, just think of maybe a way that's different than your normal way to communicate, and just to maybe kind of break loose that dam that can sometimes happen in communication where you feel like you're saying the same thing all the time.
Yeah, that's great, because I think we try to put it to verbal or words, like how I want to make you feel or how I want to make you understand. And as you know, as a pastor, we have love languages, right? And as an active addict and alcoholic, I was always trying to buy. So gifts was a great way of me showing it. I now have to be careful that my gifts aren't what I'm trying to show love with, right? My wife likes time. And I struggle now, even in treatment and working on this podcast, to give my wife her love language, which is my time, is super difficult because I think I'm doing good things, right? I think I'm pouring into you, but in fact, I've got to be honest, open, and find different ways. And I love that you said that. That's something I'll definitely take home and have my viewers, man. If you hear that it impacted me in such a way that I go, man, how do I do that in a creative way? That could be beautiful. But my wife doesn't necessarily want flowers and a box of chocolates, right? When a special note that tells her how I feel, because I'm not good at saying it. Like the hardest words in the English language to say, I think, I'm sorry, and I love you, right? Like you can't put that down. So how do I begin to show that? Maybe in a piece of art that's super interesting and eye-opening. I'm glad I heard that. Like if I don't hear anything else today from me, that's something I want to do. That's creative way. Talk to me about practical solution to, we've got a problem in society. There's an epidemic of addiction to many things, right? We start talking about electronic addiction, gambling, certain drugs have been made legal that now it's like, well, it's legal and that's fine and socially acceptable to be a workaholic, to be chasing certain things. The church is no different. The church is full of people that have defined success in a certain way for a certain period of time. And I'm going to say we've allowed it because, again, it's not, on paper a sin, right? So how are we as a church developing the idea of investigating where addiction lies in your life? Where is addiction in the deep, dark corners of your home? Talk to me about some of that where the church is working on kind of discovering that with people.
Man, my first thought as you asked that question was going back to the concept of spiritual disciplines, right? And these different spiritual practices that, the word discipline scares us, like, oh, man, being punished, but it's more of a intentional thing you do to get closer to God, right?
Okay.
Whether through Bible reading or prayer or silence or solitude or these different things. It's an intentional act to grow in your spiritual self, right? And so I think when it comes to addictive behaviors, like you said, some of which aren't illegal or necessarily bad by themselves,
Right.
but everything in moderation, right? Anything out of, moderation can be dangerous. And so I think, again, back to the self-awareness is important, but it's, again, how are you realigning? Are you in balance? Are you in balance in your life? Like you said about time being something, your wife needs from you, and you like to just spread it all over the place.
Sure.
I love that, And so it's the same breath of like, am I in balance? Where am I out of balance? Where am I? And you can always tell when you're out of balance.
Right.
You can't always tell why or where it is, but something's off here. Don't ignore that feeling too often. Even, the church is just a cross section of humans,
Right.
Like we all struggle with the same thing. The divorce rate is the same in the church as it is out of the church. That tells you something, I'm sure the addiction rate, I don't know if that's a real stat, but I'm sure that's the same too.
Oh, yeah.
I would not be surprised at all. So I think it's what am I doing intentionally to realign myself back to the healthy, And I think as a pastor, I think realigning myself with what God wants first and foremost in my life. Where's the stuff in my life that I need to prune away, that I'm giving it too much time,
I love that. The subtraction of some of these things is just, obviously with addiction, we're trying to take that out of our life.
Right.
But also you start talking about things like relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Like, who do I need to cut out relationally in my life because they're taking too much of me? And so I would imagine that in counseling and in churches equally, there's relationships that need to be pruned and or examined,
right,
as a product of they lead me in a certain direction in my life. So now let's jump into that sort of relational, and this is probably most important to maybe that teen influence generation where
right,
I'm being influenced by a group of people, right? So my mom wanted me to go to church because I was going to be around good kids. Church doesn't automatically make it good kids.
It doesn't.
Right? So all of a sudden, like, be around that guy. I'm like, he's a pretty, awful human being at his core. Like, where he goes to church is not important. How are you talking to the family about not just human connection, but really investigating who it is that they're giving their time, energies, and efforts to in that setting?
Yeah, I went to the parent space on that one, and I have 3 daughters, and one is at the preteen stage, and one is in high school, and then the little one's 7. And the preteen one, like my wife and I had like a really kind of interesting conversation at one point. We're like, we don't necessarily like love the friends that she's choosing, and they're not necessarily, dragging her down a bad path or anything. It's just the way, the respect level, how they talk to us or don't talk to us or whatever. It's like, how do you steer these kids in the right direction to make good choices? I mean, it starts with modeling. It does, modeling it as a parent, just reminding them of the qualities that are good in a friend, and championing the ones they do have that are great influences on them, and reminding them every time they go out with friends, hey, remember who you represent here. You represent God, you represent your family, and just kind of instilling in them that reminder of who they are, because identity is a big thing in addiction. I mean,
Absolutely.
You've lost your identity, or you identify with your addiction at some point. And so remembering who you are, it's almost, you have to keep that in mind. Like, who are you?
Yeah, that's a great thing when you talk about identity, not only as an addiction or in family or in a church. Like, you start over-identifying with any one thing, and then we become kind of using that as the backbone of who we are. I think as I work in recovery, I'm never going to be recovered or fixed. I'm going to use that language. Like, I'm not working towards an end goal. There are different areas of my life that still need to work. I put down substances, certain behaviors, but as a kid, I'm still going to grow and I'm still going to learn. And I have to represent that in my home. You're talking about something like, hey, this is the model behavior of what a dad looks like. And I'm in that space right now. I've got twin 22-year-olds as we're filming this that are, going to be looking at what does their future husband look like. I'm representing that to the best of my ability today, but some of what they might have got for the first 19 years of their life is not a great example of a husband and as a father. What are you telling the parents, maybe that don't struggle necessarily with substance or addiction specifically, but in modeling what I want to be like towards my kids? It's not something we say, stuff we do. Give me some examples of where that's important on the family dynamic.
Yeah. I mean, you're going to either follow the North Star example you've been given or the South Star example you've been given. And sometimes the bad example we can kind of model our life. I don't want to be like that. And that could be good. It really can.
Sure.
But obviously I want my kids to follow my North Star example. I don't want it to be, oh, dad is really bad at this, so we're going to do the opposite. Like, that's not how you want to lead. And so again, I go back to the self-awareness and the normalizing apologizing to your kids, normalizing, guys, I messed up back there. That wasn't okay. So I think if we could put that on a pedestal, I got to be perfect for my kids so they know, to be the husband that for my daughters to see one day. Like, yes, but you're also a human. And I think realistically, being good at course correcting when you need to, that's a great model. Being able to say, hey, that wasn't okay, the way I handled that. Not making an excuse, not brushing it under the rug. And I've done that, but it's like, you know what, guys, this is what we do when we make mistakes. We walk it back, and it's okay. Be humble, be willing to make adjustments. And so that's modeling isn't just always doing the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously we want to do the right thing, but it's when you mess up, own that. Don't, too many people in our world today just make excuses for why things happen. It's never their fault. So many people sit in my office and they tell me about everything in their life that isn't their fault.
Right. Let them right
here,
right now.
Yeah. I don't think to myself, tell me what is your fault. Let's start there, actually.
This will be
we could do something with that.
We could get done in an hour if you start there for sure.
Yeah.
You hit on two words that I think are absolutely imperative, not just in the healing journey for the family, but for the person as an individual. And they're obviously coming from an AA program, an NA program, and that's honesty and humility, right? That's kind of the core of that. If I can be honest with myself, now I probably do a little bit better job of being honest with my wife, with my kids, with my friends, right? I think that AA and my sobriety have allowed me to be a better friend because I'm able to say things like, no, right? You've created some boundaries. I want to go into that a little bit with you before we close out. This establishing of the new version of yourself that I hope is changing. Like I tell people all the time, I hope you've arrived at this version of yourself that you're pretty happy with and you're pretty content with, and then you grow beyond that.
Yeah.
Like you expand beyond that. Like you're getting better at some sort of area of your life that maybe you didn't even know you were working on, but the opportunity arose because you were clean. Right now, you go, wow, man, I want to work on my fitness. Great. You know what I mean? Go down that journey. Talk to me about this idea of personal growth in how we continue to grow,
right?
But also that I'm going to say the humble honesty with all of the people, and I'm going to say the relationships outside of there that now we get to be honest with.
That's really good. I mean, I think it's easy to think of, hey, I've completed the 12 steps. I'm sober for a year. I'm sober for 2 years, whatever it is. I've hit the finish line. No. Like I look at your logo and I think, no, see, recovery is not a finish line, and it's a journey, like you said. And so, yeah, I think that's such a good way to put it, and to remember that when you get to a certain level of recovery, there's new challenges, but there's also new opportunities to grow. That should be exciting. That should not be a bummer. Right. I got to keep growing. Man, I haven't arrived yet. No, you haven't, but that's okay. And, there's a verse in the New Testament that talks about that. Like Apostle Paul basically, right? I haven't arrived, but that's okay. I keep going. I keep working to reach that prize that we don't get this side of heaven. It's not a finish line here. We keep going and growing. So I think, again, just the willingness to the humility to hear feedback. Like you do talk about boundaries, and I'm all about boundaries, but I hate when people use boundaries as a weapon. Oh man, like, I'm sorry, I'm not going to go there. I have a boundary. You can't come in here.
Right.
Like, okay, yes, but that's a personal boundary. Like, they don't maybe have the same boundary. Show some grace there, but definitely have, you have to learn where do I need that line now for me? Like, where is that line? Where are some of those parameters that keep me in a position, in a place to grow beyond where I'm at right now?
Yeah. So give me some good language on that. So I want to work on boundaries for, again, no more crow, right?
Yeah,
I'm full of crow. But how do I say that? How do I put that into a language and or understandable space for somebody to go, I don't want to go there without saying you're not welcome and or grace. Like,
Right.
give me some healthy language or practices that I can put in or my viewers can put in on that sort of behavior.
Well, your closest relationships, you can be the most direct with, in my opinion. Like, you can be crystal clear. They can know, hey, this is my weak spot here. This is what, this is a trigger for me here. Your spouse or best friend or whoever it is, like, they can be your kids. They can be someone to know that the most. Now, the lady at Walmart checking you out says your trigger word and you go off on her. Oh, okay. Like, you're never going to see her again. That's not fair to her. She doesn't know, right? So obviously there's levels of how in-depth you get with those boundaries to people. But the ones that you are constantly walking in relationship with, when there's something that you feel it, right? There's like, man, I need to not let that go. We need to address that. Then you step into a conversation with grace, with love. Hey, just, I'm recovering. This is something that is a boundary for me. I know you didn't mean to. Like, this is just so you know, that's kind of where I have that line for me personally, where I'm at. So you could start to kind of step into a really candid conversation with those ones. If it's just a passing thing, I think you have to be willing to give grace where grace is due and move past that. So, but it's having those conversations on not a holier than thou level, right? Just a real level. Hey, this is where I'm at. I'm in the trenches right now. This is what it looks like for me. And then be willing to listen to their boundaries. That's the thing. You can't, Texas and Oklahoma didn't set a boundary and Texas didn't know about it until they were like in trouble. Like, that's not how it works. Both sides of the line have to know about it. And so you have to also give the space for the other person to give you feedback. Be good at receiving feedback. That's so important.
There's a lot to say there, right? And again, we talk about humility. That is a big part of, like, somebody's probably going to come at you in a way that isn't necessarily going to feel great, right? We're going to say some things, and I don't care how far along this journey. If you're a week into, not drinking and not drugging, or not doing a behavior that you didn't want to do, not eating your feelings, whatever it might be that you've done, you're probably going to still receive some of these criticisms, if I'm allowed to use that word. You're going to probably take on some of this shrapnel that, one, is probably deserved, right? I think we would both agree, like, hey, we've done some damage, but to be able to then build on it. I think as you're talking about this journey, there are going to be absolute bumps in the road. I don't care how long, again, you haven't used a substance or done a behavior. There are going to be bumps because somebody else hasn't necessarily healed from what you did at Thanksgiving to my sister 20 years ago, right? So I think that no matter how long that process is, and a lot of people think, and of course I talk to in a lot of spaces, we're like, when is she going to forget about? When is she going to forgive? And the reality is, when she forgets, and she probably never will. So you have to keep on showing up. I'm going to use that language, and kind of in summarization, as you heal, and I'm going to use the word recover. I love that thought that we're continuing to grow, continuing to recover. What are some of the send-offs? What are some of the growth thoughts that you want to give or maybe share that somebody hasn't heard yet necessarily from us today? What are some of the spaces you want to put their brain and thoughts into, and how they continue to grow and continue to heal as either a family or as an individual?
Yeah, I think put new good habits in place. As you're recovering from bad habits, you need good habits. And so even even ways to just de-stress or to offload the day, the week, the anxiety, whatever it is. Go hiking, get outside, get in nature, become a journaler, maybe for the first time in your life. I know that's hard for guys to get started, but just do it, right? Write 3 gratitudes for the day. Start with just a couple simple words to become someone who reads, be a reader. I am not a sit and read person. I've come to terms with that. So I love Audible. It's become my new thing. Going for a run and listening to a book. That's my place to really de-stress and just kind of get my head in the right place. If I haven't done that, I know, and I'm off. That's one of the places I need to go get back in balance. And so just add some good, solid, healthy coping mechanisms also. You don't necessarily think as going for a run as a coping mechanism, but I think it kind of is.
Sure.
It's a way that you can, you're burning energy, you're burning anxiety, you're burning negative energy, have 3 people you call regularly to check in on, and not just about your stuff, their stuff. I think it's healthy when we're helping others in their healing journey too. Obviously, that's in the steps there.
Sure.
And so I think who's on your call list? Who do you need to give a call to check in on? Maybe they know about your journey. Maybe they're about to find out about it. But I think having regular touch points with our best friends is really important, and people we trust, safe people, like you said, and safe spaces. I am a huge proponent of finding, we exist in time and space, right? And I think there's something important and sacred about both, right? And so I think finding spaces that you can just go be, and maybe just be alone, go read, go listen to a podcast, sit and journal thoughts, just be still. Like, I love finding places around town that not a lot of people are walking. Yeah, go sit and be for a while. We have these trees that are beautiful on our campus here at this church. And a lot of times I'll just walk and I'll just go sit in the middle of the trees and just be still for a while, or just go for a run and then stop in a random spot and just sit and be. So I think stuff like that's really powerful, on top of everything we've said about connection. I mean, I want to land the plane on connection. Like, I know that's your anthem that you often scream from the mountains. Like, we need connection. We were created for it. That is where the healing happens, is in the context of relationships with others that are also recovering and also healing. And so I think find a place of connection. Maybe it's through a hobby. Maybe pick up pickleball. Yeah. Go do that for a while. Go golf and find some buddies to go with you. Pick up a hobby, a habit, whatever, a good habit, and just to really start laying down some roots that are healthy and helping you just continue to grow in that space as you go forward. Because it's not past tense. It never is. It's recovering. It's healing. And that's okay. That's good.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow, man, that's so much great stuff. Thank you for being with me today and really opening up my eyes to just some different perspectives. Yeah. And I think our audience is going to take a lot from that this isn't some regimented, by the book sort of journey. You're going to find it out. If you're with us today and counseling is going to be part of what you might do, obviously there's resources available to you. Find some friends. That's one thing I heard from Matt, but also practice humility and practice honesty, most importantly with yourself. If you don't do anything today other than sit with yourself and be honest with your feelings and honest with your loved ones, then you won, and I'm proud of you. I hope you heard something today that gets you to take one small step into the version of the person that you want to be. For more content like this, subscribe to our channel below, or you can go on letsgorecovery.org. Until next time,